Oh, good morning, bows and bow ties. I'm trying to get myself together. Okay. You know, let me see. Can you guys hear me? Sorry, I'm not sure if you guys heard the earlier part of this video, but look, good morning, bows and bow ties. So, look, when I was growing up, you know how you had like we had neighborhood, I'm going to call them like aunties. You had neighborhood people, right? And when I was growing up, if I was out and about, I would get fed by the neighborhood. Not because I didn't have any food at home, but it just so happens if I was playing on one side or doing something, riding my bike or whatever, somebody could have some smothered pork chops or something or whatever. They're like, come on, sit down here and eat. Because, back in the day, we all played outside. We played outside. And our food was more nutritious, right? So we weren't big kids. We were all bony. We were all just running around, just being ourselves. And so the neighborhood parents and aunts, and whether they're real aunts or fake aunts or whatever, you know what I mean, right? The so-called grandparents or whatever, because usually some of the people, when I was growing up, they may have loose relationship ties to you. They could be like a great uncle, my Uncle Bubba, or whatever. And if I ever were to stop by somebody's house, or if they saw me out there, they're like, come on here, come here, let me get a look at you. They want to take a look at you, And I think about how when I was growing up, the entire neighborhood, we'd be like, what are you doing? You better cut it out. Now, I wasn't like a bad kid, but they always had eyes on us if we were doing things. And I think it's because when I was growing up, even though I came from a very dysfunctional family, like many of us have, I was still raised. As much dysfunction, I was born in mid to late 70s. I was born in 76, so I grew up in the 80s. As much dysfunction that happened back then, because I'm Gen X, so we kind of like raised ourselves too, but the community basically kind of raised us, right? So let's say your parent had to go out and do something, but there was always somebody around or something, or there's always a door you can knock on, or whatever it is. But the point is, I feel like we were raised. I was raised. And when I think about what's going on now, I'm not sure if you guys can see me okay. What's going on nowadays, I don't feel like I said, it's very non-communal, right? We've gotten away from the church. We've gotten away from having relationship ties with people. And so when I see what happens on the news and whatever, right? I see these kids, they don't care about anyone or anything. They don't care. And that's why you can have a group of young men willing to take out other men, like, and the adults I think have just given up. There's no community. Back in the day when we were all going to church or whatever it was, like, we still had a sense of like we wanted to look our best too. Like, we would dress up, we would still participate in things. Like, the adults instilled in us. I remember I used to ask my mom, why should I be get dressed up for church all the time? Because the Catholics have to get dressed up, and I would go all in. And she was like, let me tell you something. You mean to tell me you would give your best for this and you would give your best for that, but you can't give your best for God for a couple of hours? And, I went to a Baptist church, so, that could have gone, But the point I'm making was, when I think about how I came up, I feel overall, as dysfunctional as we were, I was still raised. I was raised. Okay? Like, I wouldn't even think of saying something crazy to, oh gosh, my ears are itching. I forgot her name already. I'm having a brain dump. You can tell I'm getting older. I can see her face. I can see her house. And if I looked like I was too skinny and something, she'd be like, come here. You come here. Now you sit down and eat this food. I'm grubbing on macaroni and cheese and smothered pork chops and whatever. Or, somebody's always got snacks or something. And so like when I was growing up, especially when I was living with my grandparents, we had gardens and everything. So a lot of the things that we ate was very fresh. They were very fresh, like the apples and the fruit and the vegetables from the gardens and everything like that. So even though I grew up in the suburbs in New Jersey, but it wasn't country, but it was like true suburbs. And I was able to roam freely, and I would get on my bike and just be out. But even the white people who were around, like even though I lived in like an area that had more black people, but the schools I went to were all white. Like when the white people would see you, like you were like another kid in the neighborhood. So I don't always remember all the names, but you know how you remember like just houses of people, whatever. And they see you, and it didn't bother you because you were just part of the neighborhood. Like you were like another kid. Not that they wouldn't care for you or anything like that, but the area where I was, there was a little more black people. And I remember, and I moved around a lot too. And then I settled down, middle school through high school. But, when I was growing up, and I remember when we would go to family functions or whatever, it was just different. Like even the way cousins interacted, like family was family, You could be wrong as two left shoes, but you're not going to come for family. I remember I would visit my cousin down in the city, and she was involved in some nefarious things, but she wasn't always right about things. But I remember when I would come and visit her, people would want to say something like she always was at odds with somebody because there was always like neighborhood beefs. When I would go visit her, I remember there was this young girl, her name was Marisol, and she had beef with her, which means she had beef with me. And, I didn't even live there, but every time I would go visit my cousin, I would have to get into it. I would have to scrap with the chick Marisol. And finally it got to the point where Marisol and I just agreed to just not fight. Because I think the last time I wore her out, and I'm not a fighter. But it was interesting how, like, back then, it's like, if somebody has beef with me, you got beef with the whole family, or vice versa, And I look at how when we were all growing up, there was a sense of community. There's a sense of family, even if it was effed up. You could be wrong. You'd be like, did you just come up to my cousin? So, and I remember that. When I look nowadays, there is none of that. There is none of that. There's no sense of community. No one cares about each other. And then I think, especially with the young men who look like me, they could care less about anything and everything because they're so hopeless. And they don't even care about the life of another person that could maybe be the key to solving some significant problem. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're not being raised. Values are not being instilled in them, right? Like who they are, as far as letting them know, like, you are valuable. And then letting them know these are the things that we value as a community. I think collectively, we are not raising our children in the community. You can't even talk to some of these kids because without other parents going crazy. Like, I tell people in my neighborhood all the time, I'm like, look, I don't want anybody to send your kids over here if you don't want them to get told. Now, I don't go off on kids, but I also have rules and regulations. And you know what? Kids love coming to my house. And a lot of these kids don't look like me. They love coming over. I'm like, look, these are the rules. Cut it out. So when I say kids, like, these kids aren't little kids now. The kids are getting older. But the point I'm making is, I tell people, I'm like, look, if you don't want me to say anything to your child, they don't need to come over. Now these kids aren't bad kids either. But the point I'm getting at was, we have to raise these kids. We have to raise the kids. I say stuff all the time. I'm like, if I see something, I'm going to say something, but I'm only going to say it one time. Now, as a parent, if you choose not to address it, that's up to you. Now, like I said, the kids aren't like these grossly bad kids. It's not that at all. But I'm just saying in general, if you're in a community with each other, that's how it should be, right? Because you see people and you don't want to see anything happen to somebody's children or anything like that. Not that there's anything going on. I'm just talking, right? But right about now, like, most people are not in community with each other. And if you look at it from the perspective that people like me, we used to be in community with each other. We went to the same churches and, we fellowshiped with each other, right? Or we knew each other's families. Even if we didn't always get along with certain things, but the kids were the kids, The kids were the kids. I knew people who didn't like my grandmother because my grandmother was psycho, but they loved me. They treated me great. They're like, "Come here, let me get a look at you. Look at you." I was like, okay. I don't know. I guess to me was, as dysfunctional as everything was, I was raised. I was taught values. I remember when I was made to go to church, even when my parents halfway didn't even want to go to church. It was like, I'm not gonna. I was like, okay. I'm like, now you knew I was trying to get over. So yeah, I remember as a young kid, I had to memorize Bible verses. I remember I was in second grade, third grade. I'm like, St. Matthew 6:9-14. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Like, I had to remember Revelations 7:12. Like Psalms 24. It was always, was it John 1:1? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and I had to remember all these verses. Anyway, I hope I didn't butcher that one. It's been a while. Anyway, the point I'm making was, growing up, when I look back, I'm actually really fortunate because I was raised. My family raised me. The community raised me. The values that we have for people, the respect we have for our elders. To this day, I would not. There's just certain things I'm not going to do to my elders, right? I'm just going to be like, hi, Aunt so-and-so. There's just certain things I'm not going to do. These crazy kids out here nowadays, they don't care about anyone. They have no value, no sense of hope. That's why they can have complete lawlessness, because no values have been instilled in these kids. They don't know their value, and they don't have any hope, and they don't see any hope in the future, and they don't care for you, and they don't care that you could have a future, because they're not being raised. I wish you guys could see what I'm seeing here. This is such a beautiful, when the sky is pink during the sunrise, it's so pretty. I don't need this light anymore. It is so pretty. Oh yeah, it definitely got darker in here. All right, so I'm gonna hang up. I said hang up like I'm on the phone. Think about that. These kids are not being raised. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your both thoughts.